Guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike? Leslie, guess what today is?
It's Hump Day.
This is the day that the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. As you heard me say more than one time, only God can make the day. He made the day for us and us for the day. So this is the day. This is the day that the Lord hath made. And what are we going to do with it? We're going to rejoice and be glad in it. So I welcome you, my sisters and brothers, to our special Sunday school session. And we will start with this lesson today, a new Sunday school series. And that series is entitled Stormy Weather. Woo! Tell me if this ain't on spot, because yes, it is. And stormy weather. And our lesson for today is peace in the midst of a storm. And my sisters and brothers, you know as well as I do that we are in the midst of a storm. But guess what? You and I can have peace right in the midst. Now, our lesson today, I have a question. Can you remember a time when you were so afraid you thought you wasn't going to make it? The most dangerous storm that night that we're going to be looking at wasn't the weather on the lake. The weather, even though the weather was bad, that wasn't the dangerous part. The dangerous thing was the storm that was raging in the minds of the disciples. And some of us today, in this COVID-19 era, the storm is raging in our mind more so than in, well, let me put it this way. Some of us is raging in our minds, and others, we could care less about it. And guess what? We need to put that attitude aside and put your mask on. See, put that mask on, as well as sanitize your hands and do what needs to be done. Practice social distancing. However, there are some who are more concerned about COVID-19 and think that God can take care of you. Well, I come to tell you that you can have peace right in the midst of this storm. Now, I have a question for you. I want you to think about it. What is your definition of peace? What is your definition of peace? Well, peace is a calmness or tranquility in spite of reasons for anxiety or distress. In other words, right in the midst of this COVID-19 time, we can have peace, tranquility, calmness, even though there are reasons for us to have anxiety or despair. Peace is freedom. I guess that's the key word. Freedom from disturbance. I mean freedom within. Because I'm not talking about, peace is not necessarily freedom on the outside, but on the inside. You see, let me put it to you this way. I may have told you this once before, I may or may not. But when my mother was in a nursing facility, she was in terrible pain. But one thing, my sister and I, we talked about this just a couple of days ago. The one great memory, the great legacy that my mother left her offsprings is this. She never complained. My mother, as we used to say growing up when we played cards, she played the hand that was dealt her. So she's in the nursing home. She's not well. She cannot chew and swallow her food. So they have to, what they call it, purify, whatever it's called. You know what I'm saying. And it looked like mush. It looked like green beans with just looked like a glob of something green on the plate. And I'm looking at it like, no. But my mother was eating it. I said, well, Mama, she said, girl, that's what she would say when she get aggravated with me. Girl, this food is good. I thought, how could it be good? It don't even look good. But now I told you so I decided I had a problem with the Lord. So if you got a problem with the person, you go to the person. See, we go all the way around. But I went to him because I had a problem with him. Well, no sense of me going to Reverend Cosby. I didn't have a problem with Reverend Cosby. I had a problem with the Lord. So I went straight to him. I said, now you said in your word, you would keep us in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. I threw his word right back up on him. I said, and my mother loved you. I know you because my mother taught me about you. And now look what you've done. She's laying up here in a nursing home, in distress, in pain, eating baby food. I said, but you promised to keep us in peace. And see, when you ask him or talk to him, you got to let him talk too. So I thought I'd let him see what he could say. You know what he said to me? He said, Geneva, your mama has peace. Look at her. And I did, and my mother was all smiling, laying up in the bed, hurting. The only time that she would say anything or complain is when the pain got too much for her and they had to give her medicine, but she kept a smile on her face. If she had got too much pain, my sister would come in and sing in her nice little sweet voice, oh, how I love Jesus, and my mama was fine. He said, your problem is you don't have peace. And I said, I shut my mouth. Because my mother had peace even in the nursing home. I was the one that didn't have peace. So peace is not the absence of conflict or confusion around us. We can remember the lesson is titled Peace in the Midst of the Storm. Not on the outskirts, not I passed through it, but right in the middle of the storm, I can have peace. Look what Jesus said. Peace I leave with you. My peace. See, that's why the old folks could sing songs like, this peace I have, the world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. He says, my peace I give you. It's almost like that Jesus was, because this comes in the 14th chapter of John, like he was writing his last will and testament, like I'm going to leave to my children. And so he says, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Give. We don't have to pay or get anything. And not as the world gives, do I give to you. So let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Woo! I'm telling you, folks, that's powerful. Then the 16th chapter of John, verse 33, he said, now, I see, because we jumped from 14 to 16. He had been talking the whole time. So now he said, these things I have spoken to you, that in me, not in your bank account, not in your parents, not in your spouse, not in your children, not even in the doctors, but in me, you may have peace in the world. Woo! Teach, Geneva. In the world, you will have tribulation. But, watch the buts, but be of good cheer. Why, Lord? He says, I've overcome the world. Woo! God Almighty. That's good right there. I could drop the mic, pick up my stuff, and go home because it's already peace in the midst of a storm. So, peace. Now, but there's another question I have for you. And you need to think about this. What is your definition of faith? I asked you about peace. Now, I hear you. I heard somebody. And somebody just got through said, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And now I'm going to ask you, because I agree, okay. But now I'm going to ask you to stop speaking Christianese to me and tell me, what did that mean? Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Explain that to me. I'm a non-believer. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't speak Christianese. Tell me, what does that mean? Well, I'm glad that you asked. That means faith is confidence in what I hope for, expect, even when I don't have the evidence that it's going to happen. Woo! Okay, let me give you an example. Noah. Faith is the substance. It's the confidence that Noah had in God. Because God said to Noah, build an ark. It's going to rain. And there will be a flood. Well, Noah didn't know nothing about an ark, especially how to build one. Never seen one. Rain, or what was rain? It had never rained before. And a flood. What is flood? So those three things, he had no idea of what they meant. But because God said it. So what he did to show his faith, the evidence that Noah had faith was his building the ark. Woo! Can I say it again? Teach, Geneva. That was his evidence. So if you had to give evidence today that you had faith, what would your evidence be? But let me add this to you. For without faith, it is impossible to please God. And if my memory serves me correctly, and I think it does, it was last week that I shared with you, we did almost a road check of believers in the Bible who stood up on nothing but faith. I read it to you, a poem I wrote 45 years ago about faith. And let me tell you, we have to have faith. So, Matthew 17:20. So Jesus said to them, because of your, watch this, because of your unbelief, for surely I say to you, if you had faith, he couldn't do what to ask because of their unbelief. He said, but surely I say to you, if you had faith as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there. He said, and it will move. And nothing will be impossible for you. Now, what he's saying, it don't take a whole truckload of faith, just a little faith. The size of a mustard seed. Luke 17:5, we have the disciples, the apostles, they now apostles, and we won't wait there because we got a lot to cover in this lesson. And the apostles said to the Lord, increase our faith. And many of us want the Lord to increase our faith. But I say to you today, he doesn't need to increase your faith as much as you need to use the faith that he's already given you. Woo! Because we walk, 2 Corinthians 5:7. We done said this so many times in the last 6 weeks or so. Until you ought to know when I said 2 Corinthians, you should have started saying, for we walk by faith and not by sight. We did that in Habakkuk. We did that in the pit. And now we're doing it in the storm. Because faith is to be the foundation of our lives. Not a beam for emergency support. The foundation is what we stand up on. A beam is holding something up so it don't fall down on us. No. Our lives need to be built on the foundation of faith that we can stand on it. And the faith is the flow of our behavior, not the serum for emergencies. I mean, like, okay, I got a problem here. Let me take a dose of faith. Like faith is like medicine. No. Faith is to be the permeating thought of our mind, not the sporadic thought aroused by a need. Oh, I need faith. You know, when we say permeating thought of our mind, it means it needs to be running completely through our mind in every part of our mind. I got the faith. I have the faith. Woo! If you don't get nothing else from this lesson, get this. You have the faith. God's got the power. Oh my God, from heaven. I tell you, if I had a mic, I'd drop it and walk on out, and I'd leave the producer sitting here wondering what happened. 'Cause you got the faith, he has the power. Now, I tell you, I think I said it last week, I'd be like, Corey, I just throw my notes at you and walk on up out of here, because now you got it. You have to have the faith. You want God to do something? Have the faith. Well, let me move on. Let me say. Now, let me ask you this question. Based on your definition of faith and peace, is it necessary to have faith in order to have peace? And I think that we can say, yes, it's necessary to have faith. Now, we could go back to the little incident illustration that I gave you at the beginning. And I said that I didn't have peace. And he said that I didn't have peace. Did that mean that something was wrong with my faith? I thought that God wasn't fair. And see, my faith was getting a little shaky, because here's what happens. We want God to do what we want him to do on our timetable. And he doesn't do it that way. So now let's get on down to these storms. And a storm is what? It's a violent disturbance in the atmosphere with strong winds. You know all of that. Strong winds, and usually rain and thunder and lightning, and even can be snow. But also when we talk about storm, because when you look in the dictionary, you get more than one definition. And a storm can be a sudden attack and captured by means of force, such as when an army storms a gate and they take that town and by force. Well, sometimes that's what we allow happen to us. Our fears storm the gate, because God did not give us the spirit of fear, but we allow fear to come in. We'll talk about that more next week. Now, there are all kinds of storms that come in our lives. Storms of sickness, sorrow, suffering, storms of disappointment, doubt, death, storms of mistreatment, misunderstanding, misuse, storms of neglect, nervous stress, storm of poverty, of pressure, tension, storm of temptation. You can name it. We got storms raging. But my first point in telling you about the storm is a storm is a reality in our life. Let me tell you, there's 3 things you need to remember about a storm. You're either going into a storm, or you're in a storm, or you coming out of a storm. Oh yeah, I said it. You're either going into a storm, or you're already in a storm, or you coming out of a storm. That's the reality of storms. Now let's look at the reflection on storms. Let's look at the reflection. Storms come suddenly. They can. Without warning. See, watch this. Matthew 8:23-24. Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Oops, look, there's that word. Suddenly, a furious storm came upon the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But, Jesus was sleeping. And that storm came without warning. Well, now sometimes the storm comes with a warning. I mean, you could have, many of us, we look at the television, look at the weather report, and we may see the percentage. I did it this morning. I looked to see what was the percentage of a storm coming, or there being rain, or whatever the case may be. When God brought the first great storm upon the earth, it didn't come without warning. God gave a warning. Genesis 6:17 says, I'm going to bring a flood on the earth that will destroy everything alive under heaven. Total destruction. Now, it can't be any plainer than that. No, it cannot get any plainer than that. Now, they can come suddenly. Another thing about storms, they can be severe. They can be severe. You can look out sometimes and think, whoa, my goodness, what happened there? And then they also are in short duration. Now, storms don't last always. Now, that's something that you need to remember about the storm. Storms don't last always. No, they don't. I don't care how long it may storm or what. Just like the other week, looked like every day we was having a storm. It was raining every day. But is it doing it now? No, because storms don't last always. Our ancestors put it this way, said, I'm so glad trouble don't last always. So we've seen the reality of a storm, the reflection on the storm, and now reason for storms. Why do we need a storm in our life? Well, first of all, we see a storm can come because of, disobedience. Disobedience. And certainly one come raging for Jonah because he had been disobedient. And in the first chapter, in verse 12, he says to them on the ship, because the ship was in trouble, the storm was beating up against it, he said, pick me up and throw me into the sea, and it will become calm. I know that it's my fault that this great storm has come upon you. And so we see that this storm came into Jonah's life because of disobedience. But don't be fooled. Some storms are in our lives because we have not obeyed God. Now, only you can look back on your life and think, when and where did God tell you to do something you were disobedient? Now, we get storms because it makes us realize our dependency on God. See, every now and then, God has to make us realize that we are dependent on Him. He's not dependent on us. We like to think it, but He uses us. But He's not dependent on us to do anything. Why? Because He's God. It's my privilege to be on His agenda. I can't put Him on my agenda. You got that? Now, because His disciples, look at Matthew 8:25. Then His disciples came to Him and awoke Him, saying, Lord, save us. We are perishing. So they realized that they were dependent on God to get them out of this mess. Then, reason for storms, because of disobedience, because it makes us realize our dependency on God, but because our faith needs testing. Somebody put it this way: if we didn't have these problems, how would we know God could solve them? How would we know what faith in God would do? So our faith needs testing. Let's go back to Matthew 8 again. Because in 25, they said, Lord, save us, we perishing. In verse 26, He said, but He said to them, why are you fearful, O you of little faith? Now, remember I told you, if you had faith the size of a grain of a mustard seed, Jesus said it. I just read it to you. He said you can move mountains. But I come to tell you today, little faith moves mountains. Great faith moves God. Because you remember the Canaanite woman, when Jesus had tried to put her down, stop her, said, can't help you, go away, girl. She kept on saying, He said, you think I'm going to take the children from the bread and give it to the dogs? And she said, yes, Lord. But even dogs eat crumbs from the master's table. He said, oh, ye of great faith. And He gave her what she was crying after. So I'm saying to you, little faith can move mountains. Great faith moves God. Now who do you want to move, the mountain or the faith or God? I don't know about you, but I love to move God. But He said to them, why are you fearful, O you of little faith? Then He arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was great calm. So, we've seen 3 reasons. Let me give you a 4th reason that might kind of like, what? Because reason number 1 was because of disobedience. Reason number 2, because we need to realize our dependency on God. Reason number 3, because our faith needs testing. Reason that we get in a storm. Number 4, because of Jesus. Woo! Sometimes the biggest storm you can get in can be because of following Him. Because Mark, and that's the lesson that we are going to go into, said on the same day when evening had come, he said to them, let us cross over to the other side. And when following what Jesus said, let us cross over to the other side, guess what? The storm came up. And the response, as we will see in the lesson today, I'm sure you said, well, we have the lesson. Yeah, but we're going to have a scripture that we're going to look at closely. As you will see in next week's lesson and all, the response to the storm, tell Jesus. That's it. Tell Jesus. And reason, many times in the storm, we get wet or the storm almost takes us under, is because we have gotten out from under the umbrella. And Jesus is our umbrella. Okay, so now, with the time that we have left, let's look at the story. Mark chapter 4, verse 35 through 41. Hang on now, because you know I'm going to take you kind of quickly. And the same day, when the even was come, he said unto them, let us pass over unto the other side. And when they had sent away the multitude, I want you to remember this. When they had sent away the multitude, they took him even as he was in the ship. And there were also with him other little ships. Now remember, I said, and when they had sent away the multitude, I said, remember that you need to hold that in your brain until next week. I know it's asking a little much of some of us, because I be done forgot. If I don't make a note on this sheet, I be forgotten it. But they sent away the multitude. That's important. And there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship, so that it was now full. What was full? The ship was full. And he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow. Jesus. And they awake him and say unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? And he arose and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said unto them, Why are ye so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And that's where we could stop even right now. How is it that you have no faith? You've seen what he's done for you in the past. How is it that today you're skittish? If he did it before, he can do it again. And let me go back, verse 41. And they feared exceedingly, and said one to another, What manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? Now, three things about the storm. The storm rose up immediately, unexpectedly. The storm was great, because the waves beat into the ship so that it was now full. And the storm was life-threatening, because they say, we perish. Now, you need to stop and think about some storms that he has brought you through. Some storms that he brought you through. You thought you were going to go under. I know I have one. And if time permits, I'll tell you at the end. But now, here's what we need to do. Let's look at this scripture that I just read. Let's take it apart a little bit. First of all, we got some F words. Yeah, it's F words. The first one is following. The disciples were following Jesus. They were committed to following Jesus regardless of circumstances, regardless of cost and the sacrifice demanded. Now, are you willing to follow Jesus, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the cost, regardless of the sacrifice, or what it may demand? Now, before you do, I want you to go back and think about those storms I told you that we have in our life. The storm of sickness and sorrow, suffering, temptation, tension, mistreatment, misunderstanding. What else did I say? Poverty, death, doubt, disappointment, neglect, nervous stress. Now, you know, I want you to listen. Looking at those storms that come into our lives and following Jesus can cause me to have a storm of doubt, mistreatment, nervous stress, temptation, all that we talked about. Now, will your answer be the same? Because I asked you, will you follow Jesus? And I heard many of you say, oh yes, I will. But now if you knew that following him bring those storms into your life, would your answer still be the same? No, you don't have to. Now be honest. Because you know. But these disciples were willing to follow Jesus wherever he went. But they followed, but they were fearful. Now look, the scene starts out, it was serene, it was safe, it was secure. Everything, when they got into the boat, everything was nice. It was like a nice evening. Looked like this would be a nice time to roll out on the lake. But then the storm came. And it came suddenly. And my sisters and brothers, the sun can go behind the cloud in a minute. And all of a sudden we find ourselves in a storm. The storm gave them no warning, and they had no way out. No warning and no way out. The storm just swooped in and just took them over. So they were following, they became fearful, and then they were faint-hearted. Well, I don't blame them. The waves beat into the ship so that it was now full. And they failed to realize the miracle that was there right then, because the water on the inside of a ship sinks a ship, but they wasn't sinking. They were faint-hearted. And the disciples made a terrifying discovery. They were seasoned. They knew the sea, they knew the boat, they knew everything. They knew how to handle themselves in this type of weather, in this type of situation, but nothing seemed to work this time. And the same is true with many of us. We say, I got this, I can work this. We can handle so much, or we feel that we can. But there come storms in our lives, folks, that we cannot handle. These seamen were face to face with the storm so severe that they were not able to save themselves. And they had faced storms before, but they had never faced anything so terrifying. And someday, if haven't already, one day we will face a storm that is so terrifying that we won't know what to do. Now, it has been said that this storm came up suddenly, that Satan was behind the storm, and I don't doubt, because if those disciples could have seen what was going on in the cosmos, they would probably really been frightened. But the aim was to stop Jesus from getting to the other side. But Jesus had already done the weather forecast, and he said, come, let us go over to the other side, which lets us know right then and there, Jesus said, we're going to make it. Let us go over. He didn't say let us try. He said, let us go over to the other side. He knew what was going to come up. He knew what was about to happen. He knew they weren't going to be able to save themselves. So if he knows all that, why are you going to sleep, Jesus? Because he needed them to realize their dependency upon him and the word of God. So, and it's apparent they tried to handle the storm without Jesus until the situation got out of control. And how many times have we tried to handle things without Jesus and the situation gets out of control? We don't know what we're going to do. We don't know how we're going to do it. We just know that we are in a mess. And as far as they was concerned, even though Jesus was on board, they were without immediate help of Jesus. To them, he was asleep. He was present, but yet he was far away. He was out of reach, unaware of the danger, or so they thought. And the situation was totally out of their control. Now, let me say this to you. I don't think I'm going to get to finish the last part because I need to say this. Once I was in a storm, terrible storm. And in fact, I had 50 cents to my name. I was no longer employed. I'd been laid off, and I drove home, and my car got in front of the house and stopped. Said, okay, you don't have to go to work anymore. I can stop too. I couldn't find a job. It was during the bad time. Couldn't find a job. Had no money. If you know me, you know I love Pepsis. And I couldn't even afford a Pepsi. And a Pepsi was 25 cents at the time. Today it's $1.25, but it was 25 cents then. I had to ask my mother to buy me a Pepsi. And I was despondent. I was down in the dumps. Even left the city, went to Chicago, said, I'm gonna live with my aunt, who I was named after, Geneva. And I said, I'm going to find me a job in Chicago. I no sooner got there, 24 hours, they called and said, come home because this place that you put in the application for, they want to interview you. So I rushed home. I didn't get the job. I thought, well, now, Lord, that's pretty how to do. Get me to rush back home for another no. And I went to church that morning, put my last 50 cents in Sunday school. Yes, I've been going to Sunday school all my life. And I went into the worship service. I was sitting, I could see myself right now sitting at Greater Tabernacle Baptist Church. And the choir was singing. The late Jesse Doherty was leading the song. And they said, Master, the tempest is raging. The billows are tossing high. The sky is o'ershadowed with blackness. No shelter or help is nigh. Carest thou not? And I made it personal that I perish? How can you lie asleep when each moment so madly is threatening, a grave in the angry deep? And old Jesse said, get up, Jesus. And I thought, yes, get up, Jesus. And then the choir did, the winds and the waves shall obey their will. Peace, his will, peace, be still. And I thought, well, yeah, but peace, be still. Whether the wrath of the storm-tossed sea or men or whatever may be, no water can swallow the ship where lie the master of ocean and earth and sky. They all shall sweetly obey my will. And I thought, then you know how it is in the Black Baptist Church. We have to say it again, especially when the crowd is into it. And the crowd was into it, I was into it. And they began to say it again. No water can swallow the ship where lies the master of ocean and earth and sky. They all shall sweetly obey my will. Now peace, be still. And the Spirit spoke to me, says, you know the scripture, greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. So stop thinking about the boat that the disciples are in, that Jesus is in, and think about the boat. You are the boat, and that he's in you, and he is saying to you, no water, no problems, no storm, no trouble, no disease, no cancer, no COVID-19, nothing can swallow the ship where lies the master of ocean and earth and sky. They all shall sweetly obey my will. Peace, be still. Peace, be still. See you next week.